That's right guys, get ready for another Diablo 4 beta weekend starting May 12 as well as new rewards you really don't want to miss. Blizzard just revealed a ton of new info for the endgame, some really great features and lots of big changes that we're gonna break down in this video. Let's get started with the Server Slam event because from May 12 at 12 PM to May 14, 12 PM PDT, everyone can join one final beta weekend on all platforms as Blizzard wants to make one more final test with as many folks as possible. The early preloads for the beta downloads will start 2 days in advance on May 10 from 12 PM PDT, so yeah, make sure you have the Battle.net account ready as well as enough space to download. For those who played the betas already, there are a few new rewards you will not want to miss out on, but also a few important changes since the previous weekends. One, you get access to all classes, but with the newest buffs and nerfs from the previous blog post, so we will see again which classes retain the top spot. Second, know your character will not carry over from the previous early access weekends into the new beta, nor will the Server Slam progress transfer to the full launch. Also, the new max level cap is going to be 20 instead of 25, but you can continue to slay enemies and complete content to earn more items. This is going to be important for the new rewards we'll talk about in a little bit. However, the legendary item drop rate has now been altered to better reflect the drop rate that will be present in the full launch version of Diablo 4. In the previous weekends, they buffed it to let us better test out various mechanics. Now you're going to get a more realistic feel of the game at level 20. Now, the biggest incentive to play, besides having nothing better to do, is taking on the Ashava World Boss challenge at the new level cap of 20 for the new mount reward. This will make the encounter more difficult than at level 25, but now you get this appropriately named Cry of Ashava mount that I believe looks really awesome, high quality, and it's also absolutely free. The encounter will start spawning on May 13 from 9 AM PDT, basically every 3 hours until the final spawn on May 14 at 9 AM PDT. And besides these, if you missed out on the previous beta rewards, this is now your perfect chance and the final one to actually get them, including the 2 titles and the Wolfpack cosmetic upon reaching level 20, as well as the main town. If you already got those, then you don't really need to worry about anything. Before moving on though to the new stuff, Blizzard also highlighted a few of the, I would say, important changes coming to the game. This includes the improvement to layouts for certain dungeons to minimize the backtracking. Here we have a few examples with the Hoarfrost Demise dungeon, which was notorious for the amount of backtracking that it featured. So the new layout now sees a lot of the objectives on the actual path as you go through it, which should minimize that as much as possible. Paragon was even worse and instead now features a more organic pathing to objectives without the need of returning to the previous zones. Oh, and here's how the new fonts look like on the item card. This is basically how it was in the stream, but keep in mind that the footage is heavily compressed because of that. It looks a bit more readable, but then again, the difference to me is very small. I don't really care either way. If this is Diablo 4's biggest issue, then I think it will all be fine. That being said, let's talk about the new stuff, and Riker, who's been hosting the stream, did share his experience with the higher level build he got to play. One is that he found that the veteran difficulty was too easy, but things completely changed when he tried hitting the capstone dungeon at level 45, and he felt the difference when opening up World Tier 3 Nightmare mode. Capstones are designed to be around the difficulty of the next tier that they unlock, so if you can beat them, then that's a good test to see if your character is ready for that difficulty increase. However, he had to go back, repair and continue leveling and progressing with that character before attempting it again, so it's nice to see that the game actually does become a lot more challenging. However, leveling up and increasing difficulty also spawns tougher enemies, but drops also become much better. At World Tier 3 we get sacred items, while at World Tier 4 we have the Ancestral ones. And we have a first look at a few endgame examples right here around 800 power level, which look really awesome. These Ancestral uniques are supposed to be super rare, with more interesting powers appearing on them at higher levels. One thing it immediately becomes clear is that they provide more and a lot better stats, like maximum life, all stat increases, which seem to be a lot more useful than the examples we got in the betas, but these legitimately look like best in slot options right away. but as you progress, higher level enemies have higher chances to also drop sacred items on nightmare difficulty. Sacred goes from level 50 to 70, and you can already get a best in slot for that tier even starting at level 50, meaning that these items can even be useful for trading, specifically if you get something that's great for a different class or a different build that you're not using but somebody else might. Not only that, but as you move up in the levels, higher level enemies have more chances for their drops to also be sacred. Helltides was another aspect they shown in greater detail. These start spawning on nightmare difficulty, and you'll notice the sky starting to turn red, blood raining, and new stronger monster events popping up inside of them. What you see this enemy dropping here is a resource called Cinders that players have to collect in order to open up Helltide caches that spawn in the same areas. Each cache has a specific cost in Cinders, so you will need to collect enough to open them up. However, dying makes you lose about half of these Cinders, so there's always an element of risk, but also high reward. Good to note, Helltides spawn daily around the sanctuary, with each lasting around 1 hour, so not only do you have to make sure you do them in time, but Cinders that you get during them can only be spent then and not after they expire. Plus, certain crafting mats seem to only drop from Helltides, so higher tier upgrades are powered by these events to a certain extent. And before you ask, yes, the Butcher as well as other bosses can totally and will spawn during these events to make your life that much harder, but also drop those nice rewards. That being said, I really like what Blizzard is doing with the Nightmare Dungeons and how they tie into getting better items and upgrading your character that much more. So Nightmare Dungeons are the key replay mechanic of Diablo 4, and you will need to use these sigils to open up a portal near the entrance to get access to them. We have a first look at a few examples with the sigils with a few key details here. One is specifying the dungeon that they affect, so if it's going to affect a certain dungeon, you will see its name popping up like the Blind Burrows, Cultist Refuge, or Sunken Ruins in these examples. It also shows the max number of revives that you're allowed during them. Some can be higher at 12, others much lower, permitting just 4. And on the second half, the sigil shows the affixes or modifiers that you can expect. So this includes the types of damage, like lightning, that you might want to consider having resistances to, additional mechanics such as nightmare portals, monsters getting new powers, and so on will be listed on the item cards themselves, with higher level or more difficulty ones having of course a lot more of these affixes present. Best thing is that if you don't like one of these sigils or you cannot do them yet, you can just break them down at any occultist to get sigil dust and then craft new random sigils instead. However, once you reach at the end of a nightmare dungeon and earn the XP needed, then you have a special place you can slot one of these Paragon Glyphs in and basically boost its levels. The more they get leveled, the stronger they become, to the point that Blizzard said these are the single most strongest modifiers you can apply to your characters, even when factoring in stuff like the legendary aspects. So in the end game, you will want to choose the appropriate glyphs for your build and class and upgrade a set number of them to make your character a lot stronger. Finally, we also have a more extensive look at the Paragon system too, with a few interesting twists. So here are the 4 different types of nodes that you can unlock, as well as the glyph sockets we're gonna check in just a little bit. So the normal nodes provide the flat stat buffs and will act as a path to the more rare ones. Then there's the magic nodes, the blue ones with different affixes that are normally harder to find on gear. In this case, the example was with crackling damage, which would be appropriate for a sorcerer that uses electric damage, for example. The third type is going to be the rare node. These are about 10 per each of the Paragon boards, and on top of providing powerful effects on their own, they also list a certain stat requirement for an additional buff. So matching this stat requirement will give you a huge boost. Like in this case, you can see a 32% increased damage versus elites, which is actually really great. This means that even off stats or stats that you don't use as primary ones for your class and build can become potentially super useful if you can get a very strong rare node buff as a result out of it. The fourth and final one is basically the legendary node, very powerful, and this is unique to each class and each board. From the looks of it, it's pretty close to around the power of the legendary aspect, so it's going to be definitely very useful. Besides these 4 nodes, the Paragon boards also contain glyph sockets. This is where you will place the glyphs, especially after upgrading them via the Nightmare dungeons. They tend to be surrounded by other normal nodes too, so not only are they affected by the adjacent nodes, they also fuel the other adjacent nodes, so they kinda all benefit from one another. Furthermore, as you continue to level these glyphs, the circle area that you see is going to start growing, affecting a lot more of the nearby nodes, and as such benefiting from all the combined bonuses that they receive and also give back. It all looks really deep actually and complex, but in a good way that doesn't seem overwhelming. It seems that every feature has its own mechanics to make your character stronger, and it goes just deep enough to make it feel meaningful without again feeling overwhelming. This is pretty much it with the news. See you guys in the next beta, and until next time.